Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and a lot of people right now are asking me, what would I do if I had to start over today? I think this is a fantastic thought experiment, not only for collectibles, but economics and life in general. There are a lot of very clear ideas that I have today in hindsight that I think are fundamental for not only being financially successful, but just living a happier life. And number one is going to be lowering your expenses. This is not only crucial to life in general, but definitely collectibles. You know, the name of the game right now in Pokemon is not about which card to buy. It's about, do I have that money ready for when certain items appear? And the number one way to do that is lowering your expenses. The whole grandma house, basement bunker meme that I'm always joking about is a very strong contributing factor for why I was able to stay at the top of the market from the beginning until today. You know, I always had very low expenses, and simple math means the lower expenses, the more money comes back to you, whether you want to put that into investments, collectibles, whatever, pick your poison. The bottom line is you retain more of what you're doing. And I get it that there's a lot of social pressure out there. I think there's more noise than ever. It's constant now with social media, and I understand you want to do what your peers are doing. But the problem is there's certain people who are living that whatever lifestyle by the beach in a city, you know, whatever it is, that are more solvent than others. There's a lot of people living that same lifestyle, but they're treading water. So when you bring that into collectibles, any little change in the current is going to knock you down. But when you're financially solvent, when you have more gap there, when your expenses are lower, you're so high above that water level that you won't even notice like waves happening. You know, you're good because you have so much more insulation. And more importantly, you'll be able to seize those opportunities. And I think another really valuable idea I've learned over the past 15 years is that it's not only about the literal money, there's also this emotional peace of mind preparedness you have for when an opportunity comes your way. So it's hand in hand. Those people who are treading water all the time, not only do they have a much lower rolling capital, but they're usually much more stressed and, you know, much more pressed to have to do something, flip something, you know, generate profit. But those people have that wider range. Not only do they have more money, but they can be more calm. They can be ready to buy that item or not buy that item when it comes their way. And I think that is just as valuable as the money itself. I've seen so many people have to sell once in a lifetime cards to pay rent, to buy a car, to satisfy their spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. You know, I've seen that happen over and over and over again. And guess where they are today? Probably right back to where they started before that sale, because that's not where you want to be, because they're in a position that's forcing them to do that, to make that short-term move to sustain a lifestyle that really at the end of the day isn't probably sustainable for their income or how much, you know, how much money they're generating. And that's really hard truth. That's a really tough pill for a lot of people to swallow, because today we can just in a matter of seconds swipe, flip, click, whatever it is, we can see $1 million homes, deca millionaires, 100 millionaires, billionaires lifestyle in a matter of seconds. And you know that has influence on people, but again, there's numbers behind all that. There's ratios behind all that. And you know, more importantly, when you're talking about collectibles, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're always treading water, because then you have to worry too much about, did I get that right? Did I sell at the right time? You know, that's another question I see a lot of people asking. When's the right time to sell? You don't have to worry about that if your expenses are low. Another way to like give you this idea is that the best sluggers in baseball don't have 1,000 batting average. No one does. No one's going to hit every single pitch out of the park. That's not realistic. More importantly, when you have that gap there, when you have lower expenses and you keep more profit, you don't have to worry, because you're not going to hit nothing but home runs. You know, even the most successful people in this hobby are not knocking it out of the park. I think I'm paraphrasing from Warren Buffett's quotes that was like, you won't sell at the highest and buy at the lowest. That's not going to happen in the stock market. It's the same for collectibles. You're not going to sell at the best time. You might hit a couple here and there at a peak, maybe, good for you. But that's not a sustainable business model. That's not a sustainable ratio. That's not a sustainable probability. So again, it's more important to have that core setup where your expenses are lower and you have that room to breathe, so you don't have to worry about that. Because again, your batting average will never be perfect. And I think this lowering expenses could be its own topic. And it's taken over a lot of this video, but it could be its own topic. And I think it's like one of the most fundamental variables, whatever you want to call it, for being successful in collectibles, because at the end of the day, you do need good cash flow. You do need to have capital and revenue coming in, and decreasing your expenses is the best way to do that. One last thing on that point, when I started, a lot of people like hearing the personal side. When I started, I was in college. I was really young, like 18, 19. And I lived at home instead of going to a dorm, doing whatever. My university was really close to me. I didn't feel like I was losing out on anything. I still socialized with numerous groups of friends, played soccer. I had a lot of different friend groups in college, and I didn't see any downside, from not living in a dorm. Because at the end of the day, in that context, you're really not fully moved out. Like, it's a facade. A lot of people are actually being funded by their parents. I figured that all out. I'm like, wait, these guys are going to carry this debt over when this ends. Like, this is only 4 or 5 years for most people. So it's going to end. And after that, they're going to have all this debt, where for me, I took all the money I earned from my little jobs or little hustles I did here and there, and it all 100% went right back in. And this isn't unique to me. Rudy talks about a very similar situation. A lot of the other people in the hobby, one of the biggest universal patterns I see for successful people in this hobby is they're very minimal. Outside of their hobbies and collectibles, they live very minimal lifestyles. And, the proof's in the pudding. So, moving along, and take a sponsored sip, moving along into one of the next points of discussion, which I think this one again could be its own video. The market is much larger today, and that's obvious for a lot of people. Like, yeah, duh, everything's more expensive. It's just bigger than ever. But there's a lot to dig into that. Going back to when I started in the mid 2000s, you could shave zeros off of a lot of these prices. But what you have to understand is a lot of people just cherry pick the low price. And obviously, yeah, if you could buy a Charizard first edition base at $1,000 PSA9, yes, it's a real price. If you could buy that today, that's fantastic. Why? Because the market's much bigger. Back then, it was much more difficult to scale. If I had to start over today, I would scale so much quicker. In fact, I would even say a very confident statement that I would get to where I am now faster than the 15 years it took. What you're seeing right now is a result of 15 years of consistent effort, passion, going pretty much all in, for over a decade. I feel like I could get to this space quicker because I could scale faster in today's market. A better way to address this is, in the past 3 to 5 years, I've spent more money than the past 10, by far. Like, not even close. Like, it's not even close. So that's the point at the end of the day, is that the market is much larger today, and because of that, you're able to scale quicker. One of the best examples is this Charizard promo. I had to do it. This is one I talked about in Patreon. If you join that month, I just doubled your money instantly or tripled it, because this was such a fantastic buy. Not only would something like this never exist in 2007, these promos, go look it up on Bulbapedia. You can go from 2006 to like 2010. The amount of promos in like 4 years is probably less than the amount of promos we have in 6 months to a year now. That's what you really got to understand, is the opportunity is just oozing today. It's just dripping everywhere. There's so much opportunity today. It's so much easier to scale today. It's also easier to fail, but with that, you could fail faster. You could fail faster and adapt faster. It's a very common term here in finance, like fail fast. What that means is get it done, fail quickly, move on, and adapt. You can do that today in light speed. But back in the day, that process would be longer. Your capital would be locked up longer. Things would take so much longer back then. To do any sale, especially a big deal, took ages back in the day. It's not like today where I'm running consignments and I have all these branches, they're only a few years old, branching out of the smpratte empire at this point. That is not something you could build back then, where today you can. To dig a little deeper into this, like, there's so many YouTubers and people, I don't even know who they are. Like, someone posted this girl on E4 talking about Logan Paul and all, the typical like gossip stuff. And I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are, but that's more to the point, is that you can just create channels and create interest, do whatever it is, so much quicker today than you could 5 years ago, especially 10 years ago, and definitely 15 years ago, when it was just a barren wasteland. It was like the background of Sabrina's Gengar. Like, it was just gravestones. So that is one of the biggest differences today. It's obvious on the surface, but the opportunity today is just everywhere. So therefore, if you have that same mindset, if you have those same goals and that same hunger, you can scale so much faster today. And another way, or another, I guess, analogy to give you is that scaling and adaptation, what it's all about. I preach that all the time about adapting. A good way to highlight this is that Tropical Wind card that you see over the Chunky Dunkies here in the background. One of my favorite cards. A lot of people know that. I think it's just an S tier card all around. I think the first one I bought was probably around $1,000, give or take. The most recent one I bought, within this year, I guess towards the end of the year, this year was $22,000 ungraded. So my point is I move with the tide. Now I'm still buying the same stuff today. That's how you stay at the top of the market. You move with the tide. Of course, there's a lot of analytics behind that. There's a lot of strategic risk behind that. But my point is that buying it today at 22K is much easier than buying it back then at one. A lot of people are like, oh, well, 1,000 is less, right? No, absolutely not. Buying it at one back then would probably take years for you to see some type of substantial movement to be enough motivation for you to sell. Where today, it's like that 22K I bought, of course, there's strategy in there. It's probably going to hit an 8 or 9. Maybe wishful thinking might even go above a 9. It's a very clean copy. But the point is that I can move that much faster today. And we're talking the higher end of the market here because the market is so large. Again, just trying to emphasize this ability to scale. One other idea I want to throw out there that I think is really important is, continuing this idea of price relativity. People have to understand that's relative to the market. That 1K I spent back then is more than like the 10K I spend today. That's the easiest way to say it. Like the 1K back then is just like, that was the higher echelon of the market, but you got to understand, like, it not only is a higher echelon, it was so much slower. Where now, if I spend 10K or you go even deeper, that's less relative to what's going on in the market. That's the point, is that you can scale. Now, is any of this easy? Absolutely not. If this were easy, it wouldn't be worthwhile. We wouldn't be here. If every card was an energy, nobody would care. We're all here because there is some type of layered challenge. That's the point of life. That's the meaning of life in general. Got to put in some effort. You got to try. But at the end of the day, my point is ultimately that today the $10,000 in the market objectively is less than $1,000 back in 2008. And that's what I mean about price relativity, is that you got to understand the full picture, the full market. And last but not least, when people ask me, what would I do if I start over? Sometimes it's an elaborate what should I buy type question, which you can never say that. Something like Charizard's a great example of a strategy that I wouldn't have done back then because it wasn't possible. Where today, why am I doing this strategy? Because it's me adapting in real time. And again, this is just one little branch of the many in smpratte. And the point is that this is adapting in real time. More specifically, it's just me at the end of the day. Whoever you are out there, whoever's watching this, everyone has certain skill sets that you're always like cultivating, and you're always working on. Like, we can get really philosophical. Identity is this constant construction and reconstruction, through time. And that's the hard thing to really explain to people, is that the cards I have or whatever I've done is simply a reflection of me, more specifically like that consistent passion, risk appetite, et cetera, of just not caring, just not caring what other people think. And that's probably a good thing to close on, is just not listening to any doubters. It's different when someone's like, hey, you have X amount of money and you have like all this debt, maybe you should chill out. That's like sound advice. But there's a difference with people like Pokemon, like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. I just didn't care about any of that. There's a lot that we could talk about in this in relation to starting over. The reason why I was able to stay at the top from the beginning until now is because I had that laser focus, and it's not unique to me. You see it across the board, whether it's in sports, finance, I don't care what category of life it is. One of the most universal truths is that focus, that laser focus of the goal, that bullseye. That's what it's all about, and that's what you got to have at the end of the day. I guess the easiest way to say it is exceptional effort yields exceptional outcome or exceptional opportunity. If you have that added effort, all it's doing is increasing your probability of success. Not a guarantee, because there are none, but that's what it is at the end of the day. So that's what I can give you. It's inherently a discussion, some type of philosophical discussion, because I can't give you a what should I buy, card list that'll make you to where it is today. Because again, even I am adapting in real time. Like, the Charizards are a perfect example of something that I'm not like, okay, I need to buy this, I need to buy that. This is something that came up when I looked it over, looked at the parameters, everything. I'm like, yep, I'm going to go in on this one. I'm going to buy however many of them. It happens because, again, that core of learning, of taking those risks, learning from your failures. You could fail faster today. You can learn faster today. You can adapt faster today. So again, that's what I would do. I'd probably scale much quicker today than I would have back then. So anyway, there it is. That's the discussion. I could do this forever. It's a very good topic. Actually, thanks to everyone who asked this question, because it's something that I think about all the time. It's a topic that I think is very interesting to dive into. Whether I'd love to pick Rudy's brain or other people's brains who are in other hobbies or other parts of life, and really see the parallels, because I think there's a lot there if you notice the similar words and the lowering your expenses and a lot of the similar phrasing going on. There's a lot of universal truths here that I think apply to a lot of things in life. So there it is, guys. Really fun topic. You know the deal. Let me know how I feel. It's pretty much it. Till next time.